Today we're going to talk about understanding our characters, and we're going to take a look at what characters say, what they think, what they feel, what they want, and how they feel about other characters. And we're going to do that by looking at the things that they say and do, especially when we look at characters' relationships with others. So, for example, when we think about Mila and Peter, we want to stop and think about the clues that the author gives us about how they feel about each other. And then keeping in mind that at the beginning of the book, they might feel one way. It might begin to change towards the middle, and at the end be completely different. And this is part of what makes it realistic. Or another word we've talked about is believable. And keeping in mind that a mystery is realistic fiction, which means it needs to be believable. So our characters are going to change because of these events, and they're going to say and do things, and everything that they say and do should be believable. We also want to stop and think about what is the character thinking, what is the action, what are their feelings, and then we also want to look at dialogue. And dialogue is when they talk to one another. So this is when one character talks to another character. And we want to look at the words they say to one another. And then to think a little deeper, we want to think about the way our characters are developed. And we're going to begin to think about their traits and specific qualities that are shown through these actions, feelings, dialogue, and thoughts. And remember, dialogue, as I said before, is when characters speak to one another. So it's the words they say versus the words they think. And there's many different ways we can look at characters. So we can think of a direct characterization. This means the author tells us right away. So the author has flat out told us Mila is scared of heights, right? So that is something that the author has told us. Indirect characterization is the opposite. The author does not tell us. We must infer it through what the character shows. Now, this is again their actions, their thoughts, their feelings, and the dialogue that they have. All of these things tell us the kind of person they are and allow us to infer what it is they feel or what it is they or how it is they act. So keeping that in mind, like one thing we know is Mila is very self-conscious, right? Mila is self-conscious. She doesn't always believe in herself, and she tends to think that she messes things up. She's not good enough. And that is something the author doesn't directly tell us, but we know this because she's always saying negative things about the way she looks and about the way she acts. So that would be looking at her dialogue and the thoughts and feelings that she has whenever she has interactions with other characters. But we've inferred that information. Another way we look at characters is pay attention on if they're what's called a round or a flat character. So, flat, I want you to think of it like this: it's flat, which means there's very little. We don't have a lot of interaction with them, we don't know much about their personality, they don't affect the plot at all. They're not main characters, they're secondary characters. So, for example, a secondary character that I can think of would be, let's see, Cheetah, Mom, Dad, maybe even Anna. all these characters that are in our story, and they're important to our character, but they're not necessarily important to the story itself. They don't have a significant impact on the plot or the storyline. So they're considered a flat character. So on the opposite end of that, we have what's called a round character. And this is a character we know a lot about. They're fully developed and complex. Consider them a main character. So we have two main characters that I would call round characters, and this would be Peter and Mila. They're round characters because we can continue to look at their actions, their feelings, their thoughts, their dialogue. And we know that they're complex. We know their innermost thoughts, and we know how they change and adapt. And lastly, when we consider our characters, we want to look at dynamic versus static. Now, you'll notice that a static character, I'm going to put here as being very similar to a flat character. So they stay the same throughout the story. So that means they don't experience significant change. They don't learn a lesson. They don't regret anything. They don't make any changes to their actions or thinking. We really still just don't know a lot about them. So they're static. They stay the same. They're very flat. We don't have a lot of information. On the opposite end of that is a dynamic character, which I'm going to put here as meeting with a round character. So dynamic characters are usually your round characters because they're usually your main characters, and they usually experience some sort of change. Okay. And that means they've learned something. They've learned a lesson that has caused them to change. So in the reading you'll do this week, you will see that Mila begins to realize that she was one way. So then she does something to try to be a different way. And I challenge you to look for that as you're reading through our chapters this week. And keeping in mind that can also be an internal change where maybe it means they used to be shy or self-conscious, but then they become confident. So keeping that in mind that there can be a change in their outside actions and dialogue, but there can also be a change in their feelings and their thoughts. But either way, it means they do not stay the same throughout the story because they're very complex, which goes back to the fact that's why they're a round character, they're complex. So what you're going to do is you're going to be stopping and thinking about ways that you can describe Peter and Mila's character in your book creator books. And I'm going to pull that up. So we look at our Finding Mighty notebook in Book Creator, and we go to page 3. We have a page where we're stopping and thinking to understand our character. We're going to start with Mila. And here, you're just going to be making notes here. What are some of the thoughts that Mila has that tell you what kind of person she is or how she feels about herself and other people? What are some of the actions? What are some things that she does throughout the story to or in her interactions with other people? And then dialogue, what are her words? What does she say? What does she say when talking to other characters in the story? And then finally, her feelings, stopping and thinking, what are her feelings before, during, and after certain events in the story? And then you're going to do that same thing with Peter. Okay, stopping and thinking about his thoughts, actions, dialogue, and feeling throughout the story. And once you've kind of stopped and analyzed this, and keep in mind, you're going to want to go back. It's not just for this week's reading. This is from all of our readings. So really, we're looking at chapter 1 to our current chapter. What do we know now? And keeping in mind that this is something we might need to add to later as we continue to read, we go back and add more to it as we learn things. And then once you've kind of thought about these to where you understand your character's feelings, thoughts, actions, and the dialogue that they're using, the words that they're saying to other characters, you're now going to stop and think very specifically about their character traits. Let me erase this. So I've given you some choice words here. And what you're going to do for each character, and you have page 5 is for Mila, page 6 is for Peter. You're going to do the same thing. You're going to choose 3 of these words. And if you think that one word is correct, you're just going to drag it above the box like this. And I'm just choosing 3 random ones. So you would end up with 3 words like that. And then once you've done that, now you have to provide your evidence on why you think that. So if you go to the plus sign, and then you will want to add text, and then you would provide an example. So continues to collect clues even though she knows she is in danger. Maybe that wouldn't be an example of, maybe it could be determined. Might better be brave, but and then just fitting it in your box. And you might have one piece of evidence, you might have many pieces of evidence, but if you're trying to say that this is a major clue or a major trait of your character, you might want to make sure that you have multiple pieces of evidence to kind of prove your thinking. Once you've done this for Mila, you will then do the same thing for Peter. Keeping in mind that you want to have multiple pieces of evidence to explain your thinking. And then once you've done that, you will then be done with analyzing your characters for Finding Mighty. And remember, if you have any questions and you don't understand anything, you need to ask me for help. I will be available during class.